When it comes to sweet melancholy and elegant brooding, Phoebe Bridgers makes Leonard Cohen sound like Jay and the Americans. There's something about Phoebe. And from the very time she joined us, she was sad, but in a really intriguing and beautiful way. She was withdrawn, but in a way that drew us to her. So she's got a new album out in an era where people don't care about albums, but people seem to care about this one. So we're going to talk about it today. And then we're going to go to the sunny side of the spectrum to talk about the multi-episode adaptation of My Brilliant Career on Netflix.
Away. Fist through the drywall. I'm frozen in place.
That is nominally a single from the new Phoebe Bridgers album Lost Weekend. I say nominally a single, I think it peaked at 103 on the charts because in a way, as I think you're about to hear us, I'll say the point of this album is not to produce singles, it is to produce an album, which is kind of a radical choice in our modern times. We'll also talk about that as well a little bit later. And we should say that Phoebe Bridgers, who's been around since 2017, is kind of known for introverted and somewhat mournful, sometimes literally funereal songs, contemplating mortality and disconnection. So we're just going to start with her, and then we're going to the other end of the spectrum with My Brilliant Career, joyously adapted by Netflix. And we have a wonderful panel for the nose today. It is Rebecca Castellani, co-founder of Quiet Corner Communications and director of marketing at Washington Montessori School. Jim Chapdelaine, Emmy-winning musician and patient advocate for people with rare cancer and a producer of records and all kinds of other things, too. Xandra Ellin produces The Global Story for the BBC and is one of the core panelists for our yearly Song of the Summer show, which I think we might have gotten wrong this year, but that's a whole other story. So yes, we're going to talk about Lost Weekend. It is the first Phoebe Bridgers album in quite a while, since 2020. I believe that's 6 years ago. Meanwhile, of course, she's been in a supergroup called Boy Genius and doing other things as well. And so here we go. We're going to, first of all, just maybe talk a little bit about our overall reaction to the album. Xandra Ellin, why don't you get us going?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny, Colin, that you mentioned the funereal aspects of the songwriting. I remember when I was your intern in 2018, I believe you played her song "Funeral" on the show. I don't know why I remember this, but I remember it very clearly. So she's been on Colin's radar for a while, I suppose. I think when you mentioned. I really love this record. I think that, to your point before, it really deserves to be listened from front to back. I think that the 6-year gap in between this and the prior record, Punisher, which I also really loved, made me sort of primed for there to be a real evolution of style. And I also think that I've been calling it being eras pilled, which is where I sort of expect that the next album is some kind of like radical evolution, a la a Taylor Swift eras moment. It feels to me like the songs on this record are really sonically fascinating and could also slot really neatly into her prior album. At first, I found that a little bit disappointing. Like, oh, is this really fresh? Has she really evolved? But the more I listened, the more I found that to actually be kind of like a pretty simplistic and maybe even unhealthy expectation to hold our artists to. Feels like an expectation that's maybe born out of a culture of kind of like constant optimization and self-improvement. And like the fact of the matter is, this is just an artist who has found a style that works really well for her and has been able to produce something, another really beautiful thing in that style.
Yeah, and Rebecca, just to maybe to build on what Xandra's saying, I think we hear in this album more production, I think, than what we've heard in the past, and kind of an interesting mix of musicians. Cameron Winter from Geese is there under a fake name. Connor Oberst, Christian Lee Hudson, a really songwriter I really like a lot. Jim Keltner, a rock drummer who is 84 years old, plays drums on one track. Chris Thiele is all over the album, and Carolyn Shaw as well. We'll talk about them a little bit later. But there's just a lot of production, and there's the use of vocoder, as people heard. And Rebecca, a lot of times when artists do that, to Xandra's point, our immediate reaction is, oh, well, then they're covering up a little bit, right? They're creating walls of sound, and that's going to kind of get in the way of the directness that I loved on whoever's first two albums. I think we all agree that's not really the case here. There's a lot of bells and whistles, but the truth is still sitting under them.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you don't need to know anything about the collaborators, or even pick up on who's collaborating on which track, because it is quite subtle, to feel like this is a true Phoebe Bridgers album. And to Xandra's point, I too was sort of expecting something a little different, a turn of the screw, and instead I got excellent Phoebe Bridgers music. And I do feel the album is really conscious of the fact that there are so many of these up and coming pop girlies who are desperately trying to emulate Phoebe's very distinct sonic approach. And instead of pushing back against the sort of like mainstreamification of her sound through some sort of reinvention, she's instead reminding us that like she did it first and she did it best, and she can still surprise us with the same tone, the same sort of choices, while also pushing the envelope in some really subtle ways. And I do find that the more I listen to it, especially the more I listen to it start to finish, the more I'm picking up on more of the nuance that differentiates it from Punisher and Stranger in the Alps. So I think it's a wonderfully successful album, and certainly feels very true to Phoebe while still, giving us something to think about.
Yeah, Jim, as a producer, and actually as a producer who produced Phoebe Snow records, but not Phoebe Bridgers records. I'm just wondering how the sound of it is very distinctive this time, and it is a somewhat different sound. You and I, even though we are old guys, we discovered Phoebe Bridgers right in 2017 when she debuted. I don't know. How do you hear the evolution of production on this album?
I find this album so sonically satisfying. That's going to be my new bumper sticker, sonically satisfying.
SSS.
I love it a lot, and the way I came to love it was I started listening to songs because we're about to do this show. I'm going to have something to say or be a little bit informed, and then I thought, no, because there's these little bits like in Pet Sounds, maybe like just little fragments every now and then that lead us into a song. There, like you said, there's the vocoder. So I sat down and listened to it from the beginning to the end, like an album should be listened to. And unlike Rebecca, while I was doing that, I called up the album credits like we would do when we got an album and read the actual album credits while we're listening. And I can't believe the amazing musicians who are on here who have been able to kind of pull back their thing and just serve the song. I think it's a brilliant record. I love it. I might be too over the top now because I'm infatuated with it, but sonically it's very adventurous, but it's still true to her form as kind of a pop singer-songwriter with a guitar.
Yeah, I do think the collaborator that I've read one or two reviews and heard some discourse on it. People don't mention Caroline Shaw. Caroline Shaw, Pulitzer Prize winning contemporary classical composer, who's cast kind of an interesting shadow on the pop music world, kind of since the time of her Pulitzer, even working on two pretty major hip hop projects. She's all over this album. She arranges vocals. She sings harmonies with Phoebe Bridgers. I think she even plays viola on at least one track. And And I think if there's one thing that's kind of changed the sound a little bit, it's the Shaw often works with even just the sound of rhythmic breathing and things like that as a form of vocalization. You can actually hear that on some of the tracks. So, but we want to just maybe highlight a few songs here that were important to our panelists. We're going to start with one picked up by Rebecca. It's called Haunted. It's A1. Let's get it started.
That's haunted, but I don't want it either way. I've been daydreaming about sleeping, but by the evening I'm wide awake. I'm off to see an old friend. We're gonna get on the road again. I'll be waving from the plane. I'll see the sky and the ocean, a couple ibuprofen, and I'm sleeping all the way.
All right, Rebecca, talk a little bit about this choice of yours.
Well, I think first and foremost, I gravitated towards it because it sounded different from other things on the album. I've since sort of walked that back and have come to appreciate it more for those quieter moments. But I think initially I was drawn to this because of my infatuation with Graceland 2 off of Punisher, and this really does sort of feel like the spiritual successor to that. I've also been very fortunate to have seen all three members of Boy Genius in varying capacities at the Newport Folk Festival, but most often in like these big spontaneous jam sessions with other artists. And there's just something about this song, and it's likely because Lucy Dacus and Julian Baker are singing backup vocals on it, and Nickel Creek is providing the strings, but it really just kind of feels like a spontaneous moment of collaboration. It's got this like really free, easy quality to it, but it's not really sacrificing any of the lyrical punch that we associate and love about Phoebe songs. And I think it like has a momentum to it that's sort of atypical for the album. It starts off on that sort of softer, sweeter side, and then by the end becomes kind of this barn burny, stomp clap vibe without going too far into like Mumford & Sons territory. And the lyrics kind of match that progression too. It starts off more meditative, reflecting on fame and the unforeseen consequences of getting what you want, and ends on this really joyful, hopeful note. And I think that sort of is a nice, gentle pushback to this idea that Phoebe Bridgers only produces sad girl music. And I just think it was a nice sort of tonal shift on the album and a good folk song.
Yeah, no, it's a song that would be right at home at one of Gussie's parties in my brilliant career. A lot of stomping and clapping in the barn. I'm just trying to kind of merge the two segments here.
It works.
So I think what we're going to do, Mr. Reyes, you can kind of fade that one down because I think we're just going to kind of speed date through these three songs, have each panelist talk a little bit about it and why it was important to them. So Xandra, Ellin, your choice was Still Standing. That's the 9th track on Lost Weekend. Here it is, A2, please.
Pushed head first into the world, just to be thrown in the street when you're dressed like a girl. An angel in the snow, accident prone. You left your suitcase by the bed, like you needed to.
Okay, maybe not so much of a barn dance song. Xandra, talk about why you picked this one and what you hear in it.
That's one of the songs that makes me very, very emotional. There are a couple of them on this record. Broadly speaking, this album, this is expanding a little bit beyond the actual song, but there is a thematic through line of the record that is about her father who passed away in 2023. And just kind of the complexities of their relationship, the moments that he came in and out of her life, learning more about his background and just kind of like how she's been affected by the experience of missing him, even though their relationship was complicated. There's one other song on the album that I didn't want to play because I don't even want to listen to it, which is there's a song called Never Going Back, which ends with just a voicemail from him that is so heartbreaking to me, in which he basically says, like, I know you're busy. Being a rock star takes up a lot of your time, I'm guessing. You're everywhere, dude. Like, him sort of being like, I'm proud of you. And also, I have this deep sense of estrangement from you, and how to reconcile these things. And it feels like the way that she knits together this relationship with her father, his death, also with these like high profile relationships with other men that she's had in the public eye, how these things all kind of stitch together in her life. It's like really incredible confessional songwriting. And like, I feel like she's sort of the godmother of this contemporary, confessional bedroom pop that, as Rebecca mentioned, we're seeing everybody try to mimic. But it's like Still Standing is kind of the epitome of what that should look like.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, I can read the mind of Dylan Reyes, who's sitting in his booth right now, thinking, well, that voice memo from Dad thing is actually, Ben Folds did it first.
Totally. I'm so sorry to disrespect the Ben Folds Five.
No, there's plenty of room for voicemails from Dad. I think it doesn't have to be just one of them. I do, just apropos what you were saying, one thing that I listened to this album in a lot of different ways in a lot of different environments. One thing I thought about doing was listening to it as I was falling asleep, just setting a timer, which I do every night anyway with music. And I thought, no, I'm going to have the most disturbing night's sleep if I do that. It's not a good idea. I'm not going to wake up happy, even though there's happy stuff on here. All right, let's go to the third one. This is Jim Chapdelaine's. This is the opening cut of the album. It's called The Outside. Here we go, A3.
Fist through the drywall, I'm frozen in place, but not afraid. When I am on the outside, watching.
So Jim Chapdelaine, tell us what you're hearing here.
I picked this because I think all of these songs, I can imagine, could originate sitting around with an acoustic guitar and strumming, and then all this sort of sonically adventurous stuff happens. And I think it happens probably because she's willing to do it, and she has people who are capable of doing it. And so I think it's kind of wild to see Maya Hawke from Stranger Things on the same record as Blake Mills and Greg Leitz, who is like everybody's secret weapon in making a sonically adventurous record.
To say nothing of Jim Keltner, who, he makes us look like young striplings, and he's.
I think basically the four of us are the only people in the world who are not on this record, and I think we could have helped.
Yeah, we had a role to play. Jim. One thing that I read her say that was that she's been listening to a lot of so-called ambient music lately, and I assume we're talking.
You can hear it.
Yeah, right? You can really hear it there. There's one song called Panorama that I think runs for about 1 minute and 50 seconds with no vocal, just until it gets to a vocal.
Right. Right.
But you hear it here in this song too, that she's listening to, she's kind of letting a kind of latent quality of sound do some of the work for it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. I think the other thing that's cool about the way they style her, she did this, is there's a lot of withholding. Like you're expecting something to happen here, but you're not going to get this big bass drop until 3/4 of the way through the song, at which point you're not expecting it anymore. And you're getting this big synth hit. At the same time, Chris Thile is playing a little figure over and over and over. Uh, it's just a really satisfying blend of elements, in addition to really cool songs that in her vulnerable kind of songwriting singer way.
Yeah, I discovered that one of the ambient or semi-ambient groups she was listening to is a group called Florist, that's led by a woman named Emily Sprague, and I started listening to that, and I thought, oh wow, Phoebe Bridgers is not alone. They are doing a very similar kind of thing.
I do have to say that I do think she has redeemed the vocoder, and that our generation murdered it mercilessly. With ELO that's fine, ELO. But if you recall Domo Regato, Mr. Roboto, which was a horrifying moment in pop music history by a horrifying band, Styx. And I'm sorry if I'm offending any, people who are still clinging to Styx. But I think
those people deserve whatever happens to them.
Yeah. I just felt like they traumatized the world with their use of the vocoder, and now she's bringing it back and saying everything's going to be okay.
Although probably not okay. But it wouldn't be Phoebe. If everything was going to be okay, this wouldn't be Phoebe Bridgers. So I want to bring up a very sort of non-NPR topic and get your reactions to it. I think, Phoebe Bridgers has gotten more and more prominent, more and more famous as a musician, but she's also, I think, arguably a celebrity. And there's kind of a celebrity love quadrangle that is evoked at times, I think, on this album. Let me see if I can do this correctly. She was involved and rumored to be engaged to the Irish actor Paul Mescal for a while. She broke up with him and got together with the kind of musical comedian Bo Burnham, whom I think she's still with. Meanwhile, Gracie Abrams, a musician who had acknowledged Phoebe Bridgers as a big influence and who has kind of taken the Phoebe Bridgers idea and made it, I think, more commercially successful. She can chart singles in a way that Phoebe can't, has taken up with Paul Mescal. And first of all, Rebecca, I can't believe that I know all of that. It's disturbing to me.
I'm very impressed.
I know all of that. But, we can pretend that we don't care about stuff like that. But whether it's, I don't know, Fleetwood Mac or who, we always kind of want to know stuff like that, and maybe looking at the lyrics and wondering how much of them contain any references to that. I don't know. Is that legitimately part of the fun of an album like this?
I think so. I mean, we've been conditioned with Taylor Swift to find Easter eggs in all the songs and unpack every relationship. And I think we, to your point, Fleetwood Mac started it. Like, I love to unpack the tea and figure out, what the jabs are, who they're directed at. However, I think she does a really, really nice job of not feeding too much into that. She's not creating this sort of parasocial relationship. She's not sacrificing the vulnerability and authenticity of her experience, because it's still her experience regardless if it's on the public stage. But she's giving us just enough that if you do know the lore, like you, Colin, who clearly has read all the tabloid fodder, like it's rewarding in that regard. But you don't have to know any of that to appreciate The Governor's Waltz is a 10 out of 10 breakup song and is devastating to whoever it is directed at. So I think she's done a really nice job of threading a very tricky needle.
Oh, yeah. And Xandra, one thing about Phoebe Bridgers that we kind of haven't said is she's funny. She's often quite funny, and The Governor's Waltz begins with, I'm hiding in a room like Shelley Duvall, like a shining joke.
Love.
There's another song where she talks about turning down the music when you put the car in reverse, which is like this very kind of recognizable, funny thing. But I don't know, but maybe also just talk a little bit about how you see the personal life part of this and whether or not maybe it's a rabbit hole not worth going down, or is it?
No, I think it's obviously relevant. She's like incredibly famous, and I think that in some ways her celebrity persona has a little bit eclipsed her songwriting persona for a lot of people who are paying attention to pop culture and maybe paying less attention to music. But I would totally just echo what Rebecca was saying. I feel like she is threading the needle between, as I was saying, this like confessional style that she really pioneered, while not participating in a tabloid feeding frenzy. Like it's hard, even though Governor's Waltz has like some things that I've seen people being like, oh, well, like she's on the bed and like Gracie Abrams was on her bed on stage. Like I've definitely seen those Twitter threads because of just the part of the internet that I exist on. But I do not think that she is participating in something that could foment a kind of like string of 5 times Phoebe Bridgers was talking about Paul Mescal on Lost Weekend articles in People magazine. Like, it's just not that kind of record, which I think is so impressive in this moment when people are desperately excavating these lyrics for signs of like celebrity involvement and scandal. I just think this way that she has of writing so honestly while not fomenting that is like really exciting and cool.
I mean, Jim, I remember the Shinolas when your drummer Lauren got mixed up with Yoko Ono for a while, and there was like a lot of talk.
It still goes back and forth. It turns out with Paul Mescal, he got the hook because he was a Styx fan, and she was aware of that.
That's exactly what happened.
And that was it. You're out of here.
That's
but she does say
Irish
there is one lyric where she does say, I was supposed to get married, but I called it off, which does confirm the long rumored engagement to Paul Mescal. Anyway.
Message sent.
Yeah, not that we know or care anything about things like that, but we sort of do. One of the things there's an interesting line in one of the songs, I believe it's the title song itself, where she says, she says something about it. She talks in her sleep. She says, "I talk in my sleep, and you kiss like a girl." And I wondered about that, and then I realized one of her other very celebrated relationships was with a woman. I think her name was Emily Bannon, and I think it might be a joke about that. But with Phoebe, you never entirely know. Go ahead.
It's interesting to me. All of you have referenced the lyrics, and the first thing I did, probably habitually being a musician, is listen to every single instrument and texture and kind of make a mental map of how they did it. Oh, she got a little distortion on her voice here. You're not supposed to hear it, but ooh, they're so clever. And then read all the album credits. And I heard the lyrics, but it's almost, at a record like this, it's almost hard for me to hear the lyrics because there's so much cool stuff going on. So I feel like I'm a sonic amusement park first, and then I'll settle down and get down to business.
Well, you've got a lot of fun ahead of you then. So we're going to take a little break here. We're going to talk. I'm going to do a role reversal from my usual skunk at a garden party on the next segment and be the garden at the skunk party, I think. Anyway, we'll find out.
You love me and I won't ever let you forget. Not yet.
I don't know. It's because I think I can see all of the panelists on the Zoom feed, and they all have like kind of resting Phoebe Bridgers faces. They all look really kind of sad. So hopefully this will cheer them up. Maybe it won't. Who knows? We've got Rebecca Castellani, Jim Chapdelaine, and Xandra Ellin on the show today. My Brilliant Career is a 6-part Netflix limited series based on the 1901 novel by Miles Franklin. It's the second screen adaptation after the 1979, Jim and I were 25 years old, a movie starring Judy Davis and the late and much lamented Sam Neill. It is about a young woman growing up in Australia around the turn of the 20th century. She's a little bit more modern than the people around her, a little bit more convinced that she deserves a chance to pursue her independent goals for herself. And maybe she will also find love, but maybe she will not. And I don't want to spoil anything. So, yes, it is currently the number 4 TV show on Netflix in the United States. And I will just play a little clip from it, and then we'll get the panel to talk about it. So you will hear Philippa Northeast, that's her last name, Northeast, as the lead, Sybylla Melvin, and Mira Folks as Lucy Melvin, her sister. Here we go, please.
They want to marry me off, and I want to go home.
There's no future for you at Possum Gully.
At least I'm free there. And we're happy.
We're poor.
Sib,
The only way a woman can have money in this world is to marry into it.
So that's all anyone expects of me? Just to fall in love?
Oh no. The last thing I want is for you to repeat my mistake. There was no other way out for you. I had to write to my mother and beg her to help.
You wrote to her. You lied to me.
We can't afford you anymore, Syb. We can't afford any of you. But at least you could start to make your way in the world.
No, I'll write to Papa.
Whose idea do you think it was in the first place? We're in debt, Syb. If your Papa doesn't pay off his loan to the McSwats, I don't know what we'll do. We're relying on you. You have a year.
To get married.
For all of us.
All right. So I think that sets up the premise pretty well. By the way, Lucy's the mom, not the sister. I said that wrong. So Rebecca Castellani, I should just say I watched this when I was very sad about something. My dog had died, and I really needed to be cheered up. And so I loved this series. We watched it in 2 nights, and I laughed a lot and smiled a lot. And Philippa has a wonderful smile, and so I enjoyed her smiling too. And so my appreciation of this may be somewhat distorted by my need to be cheered up. But Rebecca, tell me a little bit about how you experienced it.
So I'm embarrassed to admit I had no context for this. I hadn't heard of the book. I hadn't heard of the previous movie, but my algorithm knew that this was up my alley and was pushing it hard for like a month or whenever it came out. And I ignored it because I hated the marketing and I just assumed it was more Netflix slop and like the vein of, I don't know, the Buccaneers and Bridgerton and all that stuff that I can't stand. And so when I was asked to watch it for the show, I was like, I don't know. I can probably knock out a few episodes. I got a busy week. I did end up binge watching the whole thing, stayed up way past my bedtime. And it was much better, far much better than like, I don't know, Enola Holmes 3 or whatever they're churning out these days. So much so that I was like, oh, like it got Netflixed within an inch of its life and is actually like a decent show that's got some really wonderful acting and it was a fun romp. And I think there's definitely elements to it that annoyed me, which we'll get into, I'm sure. But the more I decided to resist my annoyance, the more I decided to lean into the inherent Australian camp of it all, the more I was just sort of swept up in the romp and really did enjoy it at the end. I mean, again, not the greatest thing I've ever seen, plenty that I can gripe about, but ultimately it did have a levity and a boisterousness and a charm to it that was pretty undeniable. And I think, we'll talk about this more, I'm sure, but Philippa Northeast is really the vehicle for that charm. I fully thought she was Zoe Dutch for the first episode. Then I realized it was not Zoe Dutch, and I'm really excited to see what, if anything, Philippa Northeast does after this, because she was really just a powerhouse.
Just a great face actor too. You just want to watch her face just doing stuff the whole time.
And there's so many choices the character makes that are just absolutely aggravating. There's the characterization as this like maniac pixie feminist that's annoying, but in her hands, it just had more nuance and had a playfulness to it that I couldn't help but root for her, even though she did really irritate me as a character.
So Jim, for an opposing viewpoint, but also Jim, I had hoped that the presence of Roddy Ho from Slow Horses as the romantic lead in this particular thing would at least amuse you. But it sounds like this series didn't really grab you at all.
Well, that was a high point for me. I liked that Roddy was there. And little known, Paul Mescal auditioned for that part and didn't get it. I totally get why people are liking it. And I started out like, oh my God, what am I doing to myself here? With all the overacting and it seemed to me like it was a play.
So you feel like Stephen Chung is not doing the kind of subtle acting he does as Roddy Ho.
That is true. It is a bit of he gets a level up on this because he gets to talk in full sentences. So yeah, he was great. So I didn't know what this was. Was it going to be like? It's Downton Abbey with jokes. What was going on here? And so I started out being very resistant to it. And by the end, and I did finish it. I didn't think I was going to, but I did. I thought, that was pretty good. And that's what I get. That's the most I can boister for you.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Oh, we just want honesty. Xandra, one thing I want to say to kind of for you and Rebecca in particular is that when the movie came out in '79, and yes, Jim and I were 25 years old, so this is part of our lives. When the movie came out, it was set in Australia, same kind of thing. There were no First Nations characters. There were no gay characters. There were no Chinese characters, even though the Chinese population of Australia is actually pretty sizable. I sometimes realize that things that look to me like tremendous progress, that's what I see when I watch this thing, when I compare it to 1979. It might be stuff where you're looking at it and going, well, I've seen this before, and they're not doing anything new with it. I don't know. What was your overall take?
Yeah, that is really interesting to hear because those characters and those storylines I feel like fit pretty seamlessly. And it's actually kind of hard for me to imagine it existing without them. So that's really helpful to hear. I think for me, this is just like not exactly my style of turn your brain off television. I watch a lot of reality television, as I've talked about on this show before. I prefer like extremely trashy TV that doesn't even like force you to pretend that you are engaging in something that is like intellectually stimulating. And so it's just not what I would gravitate towards typically, but I did enjoy it a lot more than I thought I would initially. I will say that to Rebecca's prior point about the manic pixie dream lead, I am finding myself getting pretty annoyed with this particular trope that I do think that Philippa Northeast does a terrific job with what is, I think, a really hard character, which is this kind of archetype of this young woman whose like entire thing is flouting gender roles, but like conveniently is extremely conventionally attractive and beloved by every man, and ultimately like the total object of male desire, despite this kind of like very heavy-handed, not like other girls thing that she's got going on. And it's just, I'm finding it increasingly irritating the more it becomes kind of like Netflix-ified. I don't know why, but it's like I can handle it in like 90s Little Women. I can't handle it in Greta Gerwig's Little Women. It's like I'm finding myself just like struggling with that character.
Yeah, actually, I doubt you'll do this, but an interesting thing to do would be to watch the Judy Davis 1979 version, because
I would love to do that.
Judy Davis didn't like the character that she was playing. It's the character that introduced her to the world and really kind of made her career begin. She thought the character was too ingratiating, too cheerful, too buoyant, too eager to please, and she dialed it back every chance she got, according to the director, Gillian Armstrong. So, Rebecca, I know you wanted to talk about things that may have annoyed you, and some of them may have been covered already, but I will say that the use of contemporary music, not so much when Bridgerton style, a barn dance or something suddenly, or a little parlor string group, and suddenly they're playing, Young Hearts Run Free Tonight, or whatever that song is. But just the actual recorded, trippy sounding modern music at times. I found that jarring initially, then I learned to live with it. I'm wondering if that was one of the things that annoyed you, though.
Yeah, it honestly didn't annoy me as some of the other stylistic choices. I know that Jim has beef with the title cards and has described them as Tarantino. I wrote down Wes Anderson titles, annoying. But I think that was more like the packaging bothered me. The anachronistic, like lack of historical fidelity bothered me less, probably because I've hate watched 4 seasons of Bridgerton and I've just desensitized myself completely to that. And I didn't totally hate the way they packaged the modern music. Like it was live performance. Some of the turns of phrase were like, well, that we wouldn't say that in 1901, but whatever. I was not as aggravated as I thought I would be when I watched the trailer. And I was like, ugh, it's another one of these things where they're going to have like period-esque costuming, whatever. I got over it. And I do think that I can forgive a lot if there is a real verve and a joy to it. I think the color and the contrast was really welcome. So many of these Netflix shows are just filtered and gray and dark. And, the Australian bush is not the most colorful place, but Five Bob and Kattegat and these like beautiful houses were so lush. And the costuming, though, again, not sure how accurate it was. I didn't really care because they were all clearly having fun with it. So I went in with a lot of druthers that I softened to as I just sort of immersed myself in this sort of goofy, charming world that they'd built.
Okay, I want to just get a couple more comments from the other two panelists. I don't know, Jim, any one last thing that you would like to bring up or harp
I have
upon?
more of a question. Did it bring up Pippi Longstocking for anyone else but me?
Yes.
Little bit. It was giving Pippi.
It was giving Pippi, as the kids would say. Yes.
And I have to say, Rebecca, I think just gave it a positive review, but it was a scathing positive review. I don't know how that's possible, but yeah, I found the music a little bit irritating. I know it's possible. I really did think like of Quentin Tarantino, because the title cards and his use of like, okay, I'm going to play this Western baritone guitar thing under Nazis. He does stuff like that all the time. And so I don't want to say that this is a Tarantino-like series.
No, I don't think that's going to hold up. But
No,
yeah, the title cards
I don't think
also.
so.
I had a little bit of a recollection of Room with a View, where there are those title cards with it's like says "lying to Cyril" or something like that,
Yeah.
and then kind of sets you up for the next scene. So, Xandra, you're going to have the last word. You can either talk about
Right.
the anachronistic music, or though I do think this is also a series where you either turn the switch on or you turn the switch off. I thought I'm just going to look past anything that might bother me and just have a lot of fun with this, but not everybody's going to do that.
Yeah, I think I actually didn't realize how impressed I was with the visuals of it until you played that clip at the beginning. And I was like, wow, this sounds like nothing. Like, what is even going on? And then I remembered that when you're watching it, it is a bit of a visual feast, which makes it much more enjoyable than for radio listeners listening back to it. One thing that I was thinking about the whole time, Jim, you were thinking of Pippi Longstocking. I was thinking of a movie that I watched recently, Picnic at Hanging Rock, which is also about the Australian bush in 1901, but is a very trippy, kind of scary movie about this era. Would highly recommend it. I have no idea if it's any more accurate or period specific or anything than this, but would highly recommend it if you're looking for more from this era in Australia.
Yeah. Also, those two movies were part of what was eventually called a new wave in Australian,
Yes, it's the new wave.
filmmaking, and those are two key elements of it. All right, we got to grab a little break here. We're going to make some recommendations. The panel will resume their resting Phoebe Bridgers faces, and we will talk to them soon. I'd like to say thank you to our technical producer, Dylan Reyes, the maestro, also to Jonathan Week-Pants, who's producing this episode, the Isaac Moss Report, Lily Tyson Quality Entertainment Productions, and our boss, Robin. We've gotten through another week, and I think it's been a pretty good week on the show. Time to make some recommendations. Rebecca Castellani, get us started.
All right. So summer is drawing to an end, but it's not over yet. So if you're looking for a good sort of end of summer day trip, I would love to recommend checking out Kent, Connecticut. Kent really is one of those towns. It's got a little something for everyone. Great walking trails. Kent Falls Brewery's there. If you're more into indoor pursuits like I am, there is a great bookstore called the Kent House of Books. It's got a super knowledgeable staff that loves to recommend stuff. If you give them a genre, they come up with 10 titles that you'll like. They rarely miss. They've also got some of the best restaurants in Litchfield County. Our favorite this summer has been Swift, which really puts local produce front and center. They work with a lot of local farms and they make some really fun, sort of unexpected cocktails. And if you go on a Friday afternoon, they've got the Kent Farmers Market. So you can get some cyclospora free produce and then have a nice meal and get a book. What more could you ask for? So if you're in Litchfield County or want to fancy a drive, check out Kent.
But then you won't be able to sit on the toilet reading the book. Well, you can. It just won't be as productive.
You can.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think actually a little bit of the Appalachian Trail goes through Kent, too. So
it does.
You go for a little walk there, and then you could say you hiked the Appalachian Trail for an hour.
It's true.
All right. Great recommendations. Xandra, Ellin, how about you?
Just a quick recommendation for a new book that I just finished, which is the new Rachel Aviv book of essays. Rachel Aviv is one of the New Yorker's best essayists. She's always writing something absolutely crazy about psychology, medicine, crime. Feminism. She's absolutely brilliant. And she just put out a book of essays called You Won't Get Free of It. It's her second. Her first one was Strangers to Ourselves, which I would also recommend. But this one is specifically stories where she's taken essays that she's already published and sort of done additional reporting on them to bring out the elements of them that are about mothers and daughters. Just some really, really powerful stuff in there, and not for the faint of heart, but it's all just like extremely interesting, and highly recommend revisiting those pieces, even if you've already read them.
All right, thank you for that. And Mr. Chapdelaine, how about you?
I like this new restaurant, Cora, down in Blueback Square, which is the first restaurant I've ever liked in Blueback Square. It's Peruvian. Don't go today because they don't have any water. But other than today, go. And
Wait,
also,
Yeah, I insist on water. Call me fussy, but I insist.
No,
that
I'm on the hotline, like plumbing hotline. Also for a palate cleanser from any Australian sort of Netflix television, I've been watching Sugar with the detective thing on Apple. And you don't like it?
I don't like the ending at all. The ending really.
I didn't get to the ending, but now it's ruined.
Okay, yeah, no. Maybe
so I
the
recommend people watching it up to the last episode. Then stay away from the last episode.
It's Colin Farrell, though, and
Yeah, I think he plays an unusual character in this.
All right, go ahead.
I watched it right after I would watch My Brilliant, thing.
So, Rebecca, since you mentioned seeing all the different elements of Boy Genius, can I get an amen from you for Planting Tomatoes by Lucy Dacus?
Always.
What a great song. Since we're talking Phoebe, I'd like to just shout out. That's really one of the nicer songs of the summer. It's not going to be on our second song in the summer episode next week, but it's right up there. Also, the music of Christian Lee Hudson, a major creative contributor to the Phoebe Bridgers album. Start with the songs Northsiders and Atheist. And also the music of Caroline Shaw. I mean, Partita for Eight Voices is what won the Pulitzer, but just check it out. If you watched Mozart in the Jungle, she actually plays herself on that, and there's a big sort of Caroline Shaw story arc there. The other thing I want to endorse actually goes back to something that we talked about, I don't know, last week, 2 weeks ago, and that was the series Furious. And one thing we didn't get to was an actor named Stephen Way, who is in real life has a pretty severe muscular dystrophy. If you watch the series Rami, you met him there. He's 35 years old. He has a major role in Furious, and it gets more and more important kind of heading down the stretch of the series. And first of all, I mean, in fact, he kind of just starts stealing every scene that he's in. He's really, I didn't see Rami, so I'm not acquainted with him. But it's a masterpiece in acting, and obviously his disability is just a huge part of the plot and of his character. But he's just so funny and so engaging. He doesn't let that overwhelm the presentation. What you're watching is just a first-class actor who can do comic stuff and bury quite a lot of pathos and sadness and yearning and longing underneath that kind of defensive streak of comedy. So Stephen Way, Furious is worth watching for a lot of different reasons, but he's certainly yet another one of them. I just felt really bad that we talked about it the last time. I just ran out of time and we didn't get to it, and he deserves a little spotlight there. It's been great to have in the spotlight Rebecca Castellani, co-founder of Quiet Quarter Communications, director of marketing at Washington Montessori, Jim Chapdelaine, Emmy-winning musician and patient advocate for people with rare cancers. Xandra Ellin produces The Global Story for the BBC. Thank you for listening today. We'll be back next week with a whole bunch of new shows.
This and talking about that. Talk about everything as a matter of fact. Oh, yeah. Talk about Torrington, Vernon, Danbury, Waterbury, Alderbury, Woodbury, hitting on New Britain, Vernon, our already said that one. Avon, Farmington. Yeah, 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 yeah. On the red.